The CEO's son ripped the nameplate from my desk during the lunch rush, snapped it in half, and fed it to the shredder as if to erase me entirely. I didn't scream. I opened my digital signature app, reviewing the LLC I'd formed 3 months ago. By the time he posted a clip of his little victory to the intranet, the $63 million headquarters lease had a new owner. Me. My name is Eden Marlowe, 34 years old, head of facilities operations for Halbert and Pike Solutions, and on Monday, at 11:43 in the morning, my world was silent efficiency. The light in the Glassmere Tower was a sterile blue-white wash, pouring from recessed LED panels. It was a light designed to eliminate shadows, to keep you awake and productive until your eyes burned. The air conditioning, a system I had personally redesigned for maximum energy conservation, breathed a low, constant hum, carrying the faint, chemical scent of newly installed commercial-grade carpet. It was the smell of money, of a lease renewed, of a space trying to pretend it had no history. My desk was positioned by the northern windows on the 72nd floor, a strategic choice. From here, I could see the HVAC units on the adjacent rooftops, note the patterns of the window washing crews, and feel the subtle shifts in the building's core temperature as the sun moved across the sky. Facilities is a science of patterns, a language spoken in blueprints and maintenance logs. My monitor displayed the elevator service schedule. Otis Bank 3 was due for its quarterly cable tension inspection. I was cross-referencing the vendor's work order with our internal building access protocol, my fingers moving with quiet economy across the keyboard. The click of the keys was a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the building's hum. My focus was absolute. It had to be. In my job, a misplaced decimal point could mean $1 million budget overrun. A missed inspection could mean a catastrophe measured in lives. I dealt in the tangible skeleton of the company: the steel, the glass, the copper wiring, the water pressure, the things that were real. That's when his shadow fell over my desk. Cole Verdon, the CEO's son, 26 years of unearned confidence wrapped in a $3,000 suit. He held a venti-sized latte, the green logo a stark contrast to his navy blue Tom Ford. He wasn't walking. He was prowling, performing for the open plan office. He called it optimizing the corporate feng shui. We called it finding new ways to bother people who actually worked. He stopped at my desk, a smirk playing on his lips. It was a practiced expression, one he'd likely perfected in a bathroom mirror. "Marlowe," he said, his voice a little too loud, designed to draw an audience. "We're curating a more dynamic and collaborative workspace, a new aesthetic, less static personalization, more fluid team identity." I didn't look up from the work order. "Is there a facilities request I can help you with, Cole?" "This," he said, and his hand shot out, his fingers, adorned with a gaudy signet ring, closed around my desk nameplate. It was a simple piece of brushed aluminum with my name, Eden Marlowe, and title engraved in clean, black Helvetica, a standard corporate artifact. He wrenched it from its holder. The sound was a sharp, violent crack of plastic and metal. It cut through the office hum like a gunshot. He held up the two pieces, the nameplate now a jagged wreck. "Static," he repeated, as if he'd just delivered a profound piece of business wisdom. He turned, walked the 3 steps to the industrial-grade shredder by the copy machine, and fed the pieces in. The machine whirred to life, its gears grinding my name into metallic confetti. A thin, acrid smell of burning plastic and hot metal began to snake through the air, overriding the clean scent of the new carpet. It was the smell of violation. The clicking of keyboards on the 72nd floor stopped. One by one, heads had risen over monitors. I could feel their eyes. Sarah from marketing, her hand frozen over her mouse. David from accounting, his face a mask of feigned indifference. I saw Janice, the senior HR manager, pivot in her ergonomic chair, turning her back to the scene to stare intently out the window at the Raventon skyline. Her job was to mitigate risk, and she had just classified me as an acceptable loss. On the large monitor at the reception desk downstairs, I knew a security camera feed, camera C14 northwest quadrant. 72nd floor was displaying the entire scene in silent, granular detail. The guard would see it, log it as non-threatening internal matter, and do nothing. His badge gave him the authority to observe, not to intervene, especially not when the CEO's son was involved. This was America, where the hierarchy was the only law that mattered. Cole stood there for a moment, letting the scene marinate, letting the silence of my colleagues confirm his power. Then he turned to his real audience. He pulled out his phone, a sleek, black slab of glass and metal. He opened the company's internal social app, Pike Pulse, and started a live stream. His face, illuminated by the screen's glow, was triumphant. Phase 1 of the office culture refresh, he narrated, panning the phone across my desk, now barren save for the 2 plastic stubs where my nameplate used to be, making space for what's next. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My blood felt like ice water in my veins. My breath was steady. I watched him perform, watched as the little heart and laughing face emojis began to flood the right side of his screen, a cascade of digital sycophancy from employees too scared to be silent and too ambitious to disapprove. My gaze drifted down. On the floor, nestled in the gray carpet fibers, was a single shard of the nameplate's plastic holder. The machine had missed a piece. I bent down slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, a stark contrast to his theatricality. I picked it up. It was a sharp triangle of black plastic, but attached to it was a fragment of the aluminum plate. It held the last 7 letters of my name. Marlowe. The edges were sharp. I closed my fingers around it and slipped it into the breast pocket of my blazer. It felt heavy, a cold, hard promise against my chest. Cole finished his broadcast with a final, magnanimous wave to his invisible fans and sauntered off toward the espresso machine, leaving his latte on the corner of my desk like a territorial marking. The office slowly came back to life, a murmur of hushed conversations, the self-conscious resumption of typing. No one met my eye. I had been publicly erased, and the system had already absorbed the deletion. I looked at the clock in the corner of my monitor, 11:47 a.m. At that exact moment, my personal phone, lying face down on my desk, vibrated once. The screen lit up. It wasn't a social media notification. It was from the secure banking app I used. A simple, declarative sentence in a quiet green banner. Wire received. The storm inside me went still. The roaring in my ears subsided, replaced by a profound, crystalline clarity. I picked up my phone, unlocked it with my thumbprint, and sent a text message to my own number, a technique I used for logging critical thoughts. The haptic click of the virtual keys felt like tumblers falling into place in a bank vault. No need to shout, need a signature. I stood up. I didn't look at my desk, or at the ghost of my name. I walked past the rows of averted eyes, past the HR manager still studying the architecture of the building across the street. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows at the far end of the office, 72 floors down. The city of Raventon was a complex, beautiful machine of intersecting grids and flowing traffic. My machine, a place I understood. I looked at my own reflection in the glass, a faint silhouette against the bright sky. Behind me, reflected in the same pane, was the massive, silver vinyl logo of Halbert and Pike Solutions adhered to the main wall. From this angle, due to the slight curvature of the architectural glass, the iconic logo looked warped. It was listing, just slightly, to the left, as if it were a sticker that had been applied with a careless hand, already beginning to peel away at the edges, ready to fall. People see the glass and steel of a skyscraper and think it's a monument to the company inside. They see the glowing logo and think of innovation, of software, of the abstract digital products that define our age. They are wrong. A corporation, especially in America, is not its product. It is its real estate. The product is the ghost. The lease is the machine. I learned that lesson not in a boardroom, but in a boiler room. My career didn't start on the 72nd floor. It started in a basement, with a degree in civil engineering. My first job was assistant building manager for West Dorian City College, a sprawling campus of mismatched brick buildings that were in a constant state of managed decay. My days were spent with blueprints that smelled of mildew, mapping asbestos abatement zones, and arguing with plumbing contractors over galvanized pipe failures. I learned the language of physical infrastructure, the hum of a failing HVAC compressor, the specific gravity of load-bearing walls, the legal requirements for fire suppression systems. I understood that the entire edifice of higher learning, the lectures, the research, the ambition was entirely dependent on the boilers firing up on a cold morning. If the heat goes out, the ideas don't matter. When I moved to Halbert and Pike Solutions, it was a calculated ascent. They were a fast-growing software firm, the darlings of the tech media, and they were about to sign the single largest commercial lease in downtown Raventon's history, 15 floors in the brand-new Glassmere Tower. They needed someone to manage the space. They thought they were hiring a superintendent. I knew they were hiring the keeper of their single greatest vulnerability. For 3 years, I worked in the background, a ghost in their operational machine. While their coders and marketers were celebrated in all-hands meetings, I was optimizing. I recalibrated the building's automated climate control system, analyzing terabytes of data to sync HVAC output with actual occupancy, saving them $1.2 million in the first year alone. I renegotiated the waste management and custodial contracts, bundling services and leveraging a longer-term commitment for a 30% reduction in cost. I implemented a phased replacement of the halogen lighting grid with a smart LED system tied to motion and ambient light sensors. My work was silent, invisible, and logged only on the expense side of the company ledger. The total savings I delivered to Halbert and Pike over 36 months was $4.2 million. It never earned me a bonus. It never got me a mention in a quarterly report. But it taught me where the real power lay. The lease agreement, it was the company's Bible, a 300-page document that governed their physical existence, and almost no one outside of the legal department had ever read it past the signature page. I had read it 50 times. I understood that their 9-figure valuation was irrelevant if they defaulted on their monthly rent. Their brilliant software was just data on a server that could be unplugged. The lease was their anchor to the physical world, a chain whose every link I had memorized. Then came Cole Verdon. Grant Verdon, the CEO, was a man who saw his company as a legacy, and a legacy required an heir. So he created a position for his son, a title so meaningless it was almost poetic, Director of Office Strategy. Cole arrived with a mandate to reshape the corporate culture. He saw the office not as a functional workspace, but as a stage for his own brand of executive theater. To him, the facilities I managed, the lighting, the partitions, the very desks we sat at were just props. They were furniture, things to be rearranged or discarded according to his whims. He never understood. You don't just move a desk. You move its data port, its electrical access, its place in the HVAC zone, its compliance with the fire code. To me, these things weren't furniture. They were chess pieces. They were leverage. The opportunity arrived quietly, as they always do. It came not as a trumpet blast, but as a footnote in a quarterly financial report from the building's owner, a small real estate investment trust called Sterling Vantage Properties. Their portfolio was over-leveraged, and rising interest rates were squeezing their profit margins. They were looking to liquidate assets. They were looking to sell the Glassmere Tower. That's when I moved from reading the lease to weaponizing it. I spent my nights in my small apartment. The city lights of Raventon spread out before me, a pot of coffee growing cold on my desk. I wasn't studying Halbert and Pike's operational data. I was studying the fine print, the dense legal boilerplate that is designed to be ignored. I found it in Section 23, the right of first refusal, or ROFR, a simple, elegant clause. It stipulated that if Sterling Vantage ever decided to sell the building, they had to offer it to the primary tenant Halbert and Pike on the same terms as any third-party offer before they could proceed. It was a standard, often forgotten clause, but it was there. I dug deeper. I analyzed the SNDA, the subordination, non-disturbance, an attornment agreement. This was the contract between the tenant and the landlord's lender, ensuring that if the landlord defaulted on their mortgage, the tenant wouldn't be evicted. It was a shield. I planned to use it as a map, identifying the lender and their security interests. I studied the assignment clause. Landlord's consent to assignment of this lease shall not be unreasonably withheld. A beautiful, ambiguous phrase. A door left unlocked. My quiet work at the office took on a new purpose. Every month, as part of my duties, I had to coordinate with the other tenants in the building law firms, consultants, a small investment bank to get their signatures on estoppel certificates. These are simple documents, really. A sworn statement confirming the current terms of their lease, their monthly rent, and that neither they nor the landlord are in default. They are a routine part of commercial real estate, required for any sale or refinancing. To everyone else, they were paperwork. To me, they were ammunition. Each night, before I left the office, I made a digital copy of every executed estoppel certificate on the premises. I uploaded them to a secure private cloud server, and I applied a unique digital signature, my own personal cryptographic key, creating an immutable, time-stamped record of the building's financial health. It was a meticulous, patient act of data aggregation. The final piece fell into place 3 months ago. On a Tuesday evening, I went to the state's Division of Corporations website. I filled out a simple online form. I paid the $125 filing fee with my personal credit card. I created a new, legal entity, a limited liability company. I needed a name, something deliberately bland and forgettable, something that sounded like 1,000 other anonymous holding companies. A name that would never show up on a watch list, that would blend into the background noise of American capitalism. Lantern Creek Holdings, LLC. It sounded like a quiet, tree-lined street in a suburb that didn't exist. It was a ghost, a shell, my shell, the legal vessel I would use to buy the ground out from under their feet. Standing there by the window, feeling the warped reflection of their logo on my skin, I touched the sharp edge of the broken nameplate in my pocket. The wire transfer was complete. Lantern Creek Holdings was no longer an empty shell. It was funded, it was real, and it was ready. He walked back past my desk a few minutes later, having refilled his latte. He didn't pause, but he slowed just enough to lean in. His voice, a low, conspiratorial whisper, meant only for me, yet loud enough for those nearby to catch. Don't take it personally, Marlo. You're logistics. You make the trains run on time. I shape the culture. It's a different skill set. He tapped his temple with one finger and was gone, leaving the scent of over-roasted coffee and entitlement in his wake. Logistics. A word people use for the complex, vital systems they don't understand and can't be bothered to learn. The foundation they stand on, blissfully unaware of its load-bearing capacity. An email from HR arrived at 12:10 p.m. Subject: Informal follow-up. I was requested to join a brief meeting in Conference Room 4. When I arrived, Janice, the senior manager, was already there, her face arranged in an expression of professional sympathy. She gestured to a chair. Eden, thank you for coming in. I was made aware of an interaction on the floor earlier. We just want to document it, to ensure we're all aligned. She slid a tablet across the polished table. A standard digital incident report form was on the screen. If you could just fill this out from your perspective. And Eden, she added, her voice softening into a carefully modulated tone of gentle guidance. We find these things resolve best when we focus on forward-looking solutions. Try to choose positive, collaborative wording. Choose positive wording. He had destroyed a piece of my professional identity in front of 50 people, and I was being coached on my tone. I picked up the stylus. In the section that asked for a detailed description of the event, I wrote a single, neutral sentence. At approximately 11:43 a.m., Cole Verdon removed my nameplate from my desk and placed it in the shredder. In the section asking for my desired resolution, I wrote N.A. I scrolled to the bottom and signed my name. Then I slid the tablet back to her. She glanced at it, her professional smile faltering for a microsecond. Is that all? That is the complete and factual record of the event, I replied, my voice perfectly level. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Eden, we'll file this. I stood to leave. As I reached the door, she added, We'll be ordering you a new nameplate. Of course. Of course, as if the object itself were the issue. Returning to my desk, I saw the latte Cole had left behind, a half-drunken monument to his carelessness. I picked it up to throw it away, and I saw it. On the white plastic lid, circling the small sip hole, was a perfect, glossy smear of crimson lipstick, not a shade I'd ever seen Janice from HR wear. It was the exact color worn by Cole's new executive assistant, a young woman fresh out of college who followed him around like a pilot fish. I set the cup down, a detail, a data point. Men like Cole, who believe they operate without consequence, are always careless. They leave trails. I turned to my computer. The Pike Pulse livestream was still accessible on the company's social feed, now with over 300 views. I took a series of high-resolution screenshots, capturing not just Cole's smirking face, but the stream of laughing and clapping emojis from my colleagues. I documented the timestamps, the usernames of the most enthusiastic reactors. I created a new, encrypted folder on my personal drive, naming it Exhibit A. This wasn't just an insult anymore. It was a documented pattern of behavior contributing to a hostile work environment, a legal term, a term with teeth. Next, I opened a new document. It was a formal internal memorandum, addressed to HR, legal, and my direct superior. The subject line was clinical, potential workplace safety and asset integrity risks. In it, I detailed, without emotion, how the unsanctioned and unlogged removal of corporate assets, the nameplate and the public, disruptive behavior created an environment of unpredictability that could pose a risk to employee morale and, potentially, workplace safety protocols. It was corporate jargon, a language they understood. I attached a low-resolution, heavily pixelated screenshot from the live stream just enough to be recognizable. I hit send. I knew what would happen. Nothing. The email would be routed, flagged, and ultimately buried under the weight of corporate inertia and the unspoken rule do not challenge the CEO's son. But I had created a record. I had given them a chance to act. Their inaction was now part of the evidence. The hum of the office felt different now, charged with a tension only I could feel. I stood up and walked toward the back of the floor, my keycard in hand. I swiped it on a plain, unmarked metal door and stepped inside. The sound hit me first, a deafening, monolithic roar from 24 server racks and ventilation fans, a hurricane of white noise that vibrated through the concrete floor. This was the electrical room, the building's central nervous system. This was my territory. The air was cold and smelled of ozone and hot metal. I closed the heavy door behind me, and the sounds of the office vanished, consumed by the roar. Against the far wall, past the humming racks with their blinking green and amber lights, was a simple, gray, fireproof filing cabinet. It was an anachronism in this digital fortress, a place for things that needed to exist in the physical world. I spun the combination lock, a sequence I knew better than my own birthday. The heavy drawer slid open with a well-oiled whisper. Inside, the files were immaculate. I bypassed the maintenance schedules, the HVAC blueprints, the elevator schematics. My fingers found a single, thick folder labeled SV Prop. Master Lease Chorus. From it, I pulled 2 documents. The first was a letter of intent. It was printed on heavy cream-colored bond paper, the letterhead reading simply, Lantern Creek Holdings, LLC. It was a formal expression of interest in acquiring the Glassmere Tower, sent to Sterling Vantage Properties 12 weeks ago. It was a quiet, professional inquiry, one of hundreds such letters that pass between commercial real estate entities every day. But it had started a conversation, a very private, very serious conversation. The second document was newer, a conditional contract. It was a commitment to an assignment and assumption agreement, a complex name for a simple, brutal tool. It stated that, in the event of a sale, Lantern Creek Holdings was prepared to accept the transfer of the master lease, Assuming all rights and responsibilities of the landlord, contingent on financing, it was the legal mechanism for a corporate decapitation. I stood there for a long moment in the roaring silence, the two documents in my hand. One was the question, the other was the answer. My plan, conceived in quiet anger, was now a tangible thing. I placed the documents back in the file, closed the drawer, and spun the lock. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying finality. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. I created a new event for 2:15 p. Title: Routine Check-in, Sterling Vantage. It was a plausible entry, something any facilities manager might have. No one would know that this check-in was with my lawyer in Briars Point and the senior partners at Sterling Vantage. No one would know it was the closing call. As I stepped out of the server room, the sudden relative quiet of the office felt strange. Muted, the artificial light seemed to flicker. I walked back to my desk, my hand in my blazer pocket. My fingers brushed against two objects. One was the smooth, cold glass of my iPhone, the device that held the calendar appointment, the bank notification, the key to the entire transaction. The other was the sharp, jagged edge of the broken piece of my nameplate. Humiliation and leverage, the wound and the weapon, they were two sharp edges of the same story. A plan born from fury is a fire. It burns hot and fast, and often consumes the one who lit it. But a plan born from cold, professional humiliation, is a machine. Each part is precisely milled, each gear interlocking with the next. It does not burn, it builds. It is assembled piece by piece in the quiet hours, fueled not by passion, but by a deep and abiding understanding of the system you intend to dismantle. My plan was a machine. Here is how it was built. Step 1. The entry point. The entire mechanism was built upon a single, beautiful fulcrum, the right of first refusal. The ROFR in Halbert and Pike's master lease was the key. It was a contractual obligation forcing the landlord, Sterling Vantage, to offer the building to the tenant before any other buyer. But the critical language, the phrase I had etched into my memory, was not just the tenant. It was the tenant or their designated assignee. This was my door. Halbert and Pike would never have the institutional agility or foresight to buy their own building. They saw themselves as a software company, not a real estate holding firm, but I could create an assignee. I could be the assignee. The ROFR was my legal right to step to the front of the line. Step 2. The financial weapon. A right is useless without the power to exercise it. I needed $63 million, or more accurately, I needed the backing for it. I spent weeks researching regional private equity firms and family trust funds entities that preferred stable, long-term assets over volatile tech stocks. I found my partner in the Briarwood Regional Trust, a conservative fund based out of Briars Point, a sleepy city 2 hours outside Raventon. They managed old money that valued tangible assets. A downtown skyscraper with a long-term anchor tenant was exactly their profile. Through my lawyer, Lantern Creek Holdings presented them with a meticulously researched prospectus on the Glassmere Tower, complete with my own confidential analysis of its operational efficiencies and projected maintenance costs. We weren't asking them for a loan. We were offering them a secure, high-value asset. They signed a term sheet, a non-binding agreement to provide the financing, locking in the $63 million purchase price. Lantern Creek Holdings was listed as the primary buyer, but the critical clause allowed for the assumption of the deal by a designated managing entity upon closing. Step 3. The control mechanism. The term sheet was my financial firepower, but I needed to ensure the weapon stayed in my hand. My lawyer in Briars Point, a man I'd chosen precisely because he had no connections to the Raventon corporate scene, drafted the internal operating agreement for Lantern Creek Holdings. It was a work of art. It contained a specific provision allowing for the seamless assignment of managerial control to a single member me under a specific set of pre-agreed conditions. The primary condition was the successful acquisition of a commercial property exceeding $50 million in value. The moment the Glassmere deal closed, control would automatically consolidate in my hands. The trust fund would be the silent financial partner. I would be the absolute authority. I would be the landlord. Step 4. The foundation of proof. Before any sale, a buyer needs assurance. They need to know the asset is clean, the income stream undisputed. This assurance comes in the form of estoppel certificates. For 3 years, I had been the one to collect them. I had a perfect, time-stamped digital archive of every tenant in the building, affirming that their leases were in good standing. This wasn't just due diligence, it was a preemptive strike. When the time came, I wouldn't need to ask for these documents and risk raising suspicion. I already had them. My archive was more complete than the one held by the landlord themselves. Step 5. The lender's comfort. The bank backing the deal in this case. The Briarwood Trust needed its own set of protections. They needed an SNDA, the agreement that protects a tenant from eviction if the landlord defaults. In this case, the roles were reversed. My lawyer prepared a reverse SNDA, a document that assured the lender that the primary tenant, Halbert and Pike, would return to Lantern Creek Holdings as their new landlord and that their lease would not be disturbed, guaranteeing the income stream that secured the loan. It was a standard procedure, but preparing it in advance, through an out-of-town firm, meant it was ready to be deployed instantly, another gear waiting to click into place. Step 6. The art of distraction. Grant and Cole Verdon were not detail-oriented men, they were concept men. So, I gave them a concept to play with. I began subtly seeding the idea of a major office culture renovation. I left a trade magazine open on a boardroom table to an article about the office of the future. I mentioned in passing how companies like Google were increasing productivity with nap pods and collaborative spaces. Their egos did the rest. Soon, Grant and Cole were obsessed with the idea, spending their days in meetings with overpriced interior designers, debating the merits of beanbag chairs versus ergonomic sofas, and planning the installation of a ping-pong table on the 71st floor. While they were busy choosing paint colors for their fantasy office, I was buying the walls around them. Step 7. The baited trap. The renovation fantasy gave me the perfect cover. Cole, as the director of office strategy, wanted to control every aesthetic decision. I used this. I drafted a formal-looking memo and sent it to him for his signature. It was titled, Streamlining Aesthetic and Furnishing Approvals. It stated that, to accelerate the office redesign, all new contract approvals would be temporarily paused to avoid conflicting agreements, except for items classified under decorative and finishing elements. He saw it as a power play, a way to consolidate his control over the project. He signed it without a second thought. This memo was my shield. The next day, I sent him a vendor proposal for decorative wall finishes. It was a glossy digital mood board filled with images of textured wallpaper, brushed metal accents, and wood paneling. It looked exactly like the kind of document he'd been reviewing for weeks. But buried in the appendices, listed under Material Adhesion and Surface Rights Agreement, was a one-page addendum. It was a legally binding document in which Halbert and Pike formally acknowledged its intent to exercise its ROFR and designated Lantern Creek Holdings as its assignee for the purpose of the transaction. Cole forwarded the entire package to his father with a simple email. Dad, this vendor offers a 12% discount on the wall panels if we sign the intent form by Friday. Looks good. Can you initial so I can move it forward? Grant, busy and distracted, initialed the cover page. It wasn't the final signature, but it was proof of awareness. It was a loaded gun placed in their own hands. Step 8. The timing of the attack. A silent coup requires a noisy diversion. Halbert and Pike's annual client conference. The week of WOW was the perfect storm of distraction. For 5 business days, the entire executive team would be consumed with schmoozing clients, hosting dinners, and managing live-streamed presentations. Their inboxes would be overflowing with logistical emails. No one of any importance would be reading dense legal notices from a real estate firm. I scheduled the closing for the Thursday of that week. Step 9. The secure channel. From the very beginning, all communication regarding the deal was routed through a secure, encrypted online vendor portal, the kind used for sensitive government contracts. It was hosted on a private server. accessible only by two-factor authentication. My lawyer, the Briarwood Trust, Sterling Vantage, and I communicated exclusively through this channel. There were no emails sent to any Halberd and Pike address. There was no digital trail within their system. To their IT department, the entire transaction was invisible. Step 10. The escape hatch. No plan is perfect. I had to account for failure. If my play was discovered prematurely, if someone in legal finally did their job and flagged the ROFR notice, I had a contingency. The agreement with the Briarwood Trust included a mirroring clause. If Lantern Creek Holdings was invalidated as the assignee, the trust itself would step in as the direct buyer, with the deal structure remaining identical. My name would be removed from the direct ownership line, but a separate, ironclad management contract, already signed, would grant a new LLC under my control. Let's call it Building Superintendent, LLC, indefinite operational authority over the Glassmere Tower. They would get the building, but I would still be the landlord in all but name. They could kill the queen, but my hand would still be on the board, ready to move the rooks. The machine was built. Every gear was in place. All that was left was for Cole Verdon to provide the spark. The first move was an act of camouflage. On Tuesday morning, during the height of the Week of WoW kickoff, I sent Cole an email. The subject line was tailored to his vanity. Phase 2 mood board and cost reduction proposal. The body of the email was brief and complimentary, praising his bold vision for the workspace. Attached was a beautifully designed PDF, a 20-page document filled with glossy images of Scandinavian furniture, collaborative pods, and polished concrete floors. It looked exactly like the proposals he'd been getting from the design firms. Tucked between the section on ergonomic seating solutions and biophilic wall installations was a page titled Lease Enhancement Addendum. To a casual observer, it looked like legal boilerplate. It was dense, filled with standard contractual language, but in paragraph 2, the trap was set. The text was a formal request to the landlord, framed as a prerequisite for securing a vendor's deep discount on materials. It confirmed Halberd and Pike's intent to exercise its right of first refusal and officially designated Lantern Creek Holdings as its sole assignee for the transaction. I had presented the trigger for a $63 million acquisition as a coupon. Cole, as predicted, saw only what he wanted to see. He saw the pictures of the cool office, and he saw the number on the cover page, projected 12% reduction in Q4 facilities spend. He didn't read the addendum. He probably didn't even scroll that far. Less than 10 minutes after I sent it, my email was forwarded. The recipient was Grant Verdon. Cole's added note was a masterpiece of privileged laziness. Dad, look at the discount. This is the design direction I was talking about. We need to initial the attached to lock in the rate. Let's move fast. An hour later, a notification popped up on my screen. The document had been opened and initialed via the company's digital signature software. Grant Verdon's jagged, hasty initials, G.V., now sat on the cover page. It wasn't legally binding on its own, but it was something far more valuable. It was irrefutable proof that the document had reached the highest level of the company. It was a receipt for their own negligence. The initial was the key that turned the lock. The moment Grant's digital signature was applied, an automated flag was triggered in my system. I immediately executed the document and forwarded it, not to anyone at Halberd and Pike, but directly to Sterling Vantage Properties. For them, receiving a document initialed by the CEO, formally triggering the ROFR, was an unambiguous signal. They had a legal obligation to act. The following morning, the official notice arrived. Sterling Vantage's lawyers sent a registered email containing the third-party purchase offer and the formal ROFR notice to Halberd and Pike's general counsel inbox. It was a digital ghost. The entire legal department was either running panels at the Week of WoW or had taken the week off. The inbox, as I knew it would be, was on an automated vacation reply, its contents auto-forwarding to a junior paralegal who was currently managing a swag bag crisis at the conference hotel. But a physical copy is always required for a notice of this magnitude. At 10:32 a.m., A courier with a flat cardboard envelope arrived at the 72nd floor. He was directed, as all delivery personnel were, to the mailroom. I happened to be there, ostensibly checking on a shipment of printer toner. The mailroom is a deliberate blind spot. The security camera, C4, covers the entrance and exit, but its angle doesn't capture the countertop where packages are signed for. It records presence, not purpose. I signed the manifest with a quick, illegible scrawl. The courier left. I stood for a moment, the envelope heavy in my hand. I opened it carefully, read the formal, precise language, and then fed the envelope and the notice into the mailroom's cross-cut shredder. The only existing physical copy dissolved into meaningless confetti. The only person at Halbert and Pike who knew the clock was ticking was me. I went to the secure vendor portal. I uploaded a scan of the notice. 20 minutes later, Lantern Creek Holdings formally submitted its matching offer to Sterling Vantage. $63 million, a 30-day close, a commitment to a fixed interest rate with the Briarwood Trust, and crucially, a proposal to assume all landlord responsibilities and management rights, effective immediately upon closing. The original suitor, a large, slow-moving pension fund from out of state, had been expecting a simple, clean transaction. They were not prepared for a competitive ROFR exercise. Faced with the prospect of a legal delay or a bidding war, they did exactly what my research predicted they would. They folded. By the end of the day, their offer was officially withdrawn. Suddenly, Sterling Vantage, who were desperate to sell, had only one buyer at the table: me. Now I had leverage. I began to press. Through my lawyer, I made a new demand, a final clause to be added to the purchase agreement. It was a small, technical-sounding point about the tenant estoppel certificates. The clause stated that any outstanding estoppel requests would be deemed delivered and accepted as accurate if the respective tenants remained unresponsive 5 business days after the request was issued. Sterling Vantage, eager to close, agreed without argument. They didn't know what I knew: my carefully orchestrated, routine requests for updated estoppels had gone out to the other tenants 12 days ago, and in the chaos of the end of the quarter, none of them had responded. With the addition of that single sentence, their silence became legally binding consent. Their opportunity to object or raise a concern was gone. They had been rendered mute without even knowing it. As if on cue, the universe sent me a gift. High on his success as a culture shaper, Cole decided to perform another act of corporate vandalism for his online audience. This time, it was a bright yellow, laminated sign I had posted near the coffee machines, detailing the proper procedures for cleaning the equipment to comply with health and safety standards. He filmed himself ripping it off the wall, crumpling it into a ball, and dunking it into a trash can like a basketball. "Bureaucracy kills creativity," he announced to his phone's camera. "We're a results-oriented culture, not a rules-oriented one." The view count soared. I downloaded the video file. I renamed it Exhibit B, Willful Destruction of Safety Notices. It was a perfect, self-incriminating testament to his recklessness, the ideal justification for a new landlord to seek direct control over building management to mitigate tenant risk. The pieces were all in place. The machine was fully assembled. All it needed was a final command to execute. I opened my calendar. I sent a new meeting invitation to my lawyer and the 2 designated signatories at Sterling Vantage Properties. The title was deliberately understated, designed to be read by no one but them. Final confirmed signatures. The time was set for 2:15 p.m. the next day. Thursday, the apex of the week of wow. The hour of my quiet coronation. The first crack in their dam appeared at 2 minutes past 1 in the afternoon. My desk phone rang. A shrill, insistent sound. The caller ID read J. Miller, Human Resources. I let it ring 3 times before answering. The soft click of the receiver the only sound in my bubble of focus. Eden Marlowe speaking. "Eden, it's Janice." Her voice was tight, the professional warmth replaced by a brittle edge. "We need to address the situation with Cole. It's creating a significant disruption. He's willing to consider the matter closed if you provide a written apology for the misunderstanding." A misunderstanding, as if my nameplate had spontaneously disassembled itself. Janice. There was no misunderstanding. The events occurred exactly as I documented them. A sigh of exasperation on her end. This isn't about facts. Eden, it's about resolution. We need a path forward. I need you to write the apology. Acknowledge your part in the communication breakdown. My part. I looked at the dark screen of my monitor. My reflection a calm mask. I will be writing another report today. Janice. But it won't be an apology. I disconnected the call before she could respond. The dial tone a flat, final note. The second crack came 30 seconds later, in person. Cole appeared at my desk, his face flushed with anger. The CEO's son was not accustomed to being denied. What did you say to HR? He demanded, his voice low and menacing. You think you're untouchable? I can have you reassigned. You can spend the rest of your career logging inventory in the warehouse. How's that for logistics? He meant it as the ultimate threat, a demotion to the corporate underworld of cardboard boxes and packing tape. He didn't know. I turned my chair slowly to face him, my expression unreadable. The warehouse, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the cold weight of a locked vault, is the only place in this building that holds the hard copy of the Sterling Vantage ROFR notice. So please, be careful with it. He stared at me, his brow furrowed. ROFR. The acronym meant nothing to him. He saw a random jumble of letters, a piece of corporate jargon I was using to confuse him. He couldn't see the blade I had just held to his family's throat. He scoffed, mistaking his own ignorance for my foolishness. Whatever. Write the apology. He stormed off. Meanwhile, a junior paralegal, finally free from his week of wow duties, was doing what no one else had for 5 days, cleaning out the general counsel's junk mail folder. There, buried under 200 marketing emails from legal tech vendors, was the auto-forwarded notice from Sterling Vantage. He saw the words, right of first refusal, and offer to purchase, and felt a cold spike of panic. He sprinted from his cubicle to the conference hotel, finding Cole in a green room schmoozing a client. Cole, we got a ROFR notice from the landlord. It's for the whole building, the paralegal whispered, shoving his phone in Cole's face. Cole glanced at the screen, annoyed by the interruption. I don't know. Looks like spam to me. They're always trying to sell us something. Just delete it. He turned back to the client, dismissing the most important legal document the company had received in a decade with a wave of his hand. But the paralegal, terrified of being the one who ignored a bombshell, went over Cole's head. At 1:37 p.m., an urgent calendar invitation appeared on my screen. Sender Grant Verdon. Title, Urgent Glassmere Tower Matter. The meeting was for 1:40 p.m. I clicked accept, but added a note. Maybe delayed by a few minutes. Finalizing a vendor report. Now, I moved. The time for quiet preparation was over. It was time to shape the battlefield. I opened the secure vendor portal and composed a new message to the legal team at Sterling Vantage. The subject was Tenant Risk Factor, Halberd and Pike. I attached the video file of Cole ripping the safety notice from the wall. My message was concise, attaching a recent example of the current tenant's on-site management behavior. We believe this pattern of conduct represents a potential risk to asset integrity and safety. Lantern Creek Holdings is fully prepared to assume all on-site management and risk mitigation duties upon closing to ensure the protection of the asset. I hit send. The message was uploaded, encrypted, and delivered, a silent, digital torpedo. A minute later, a new message popped up in the portal. It was from Sterling Vantage's lead attorney. Message and attachment received and reviewed. Does Lantern Creek confirm its readiness to assume immediate management of tenant risk protocols? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Confirmed. We are ready. In the Halberd and Pike server room, a frantic request was now flying from the legal department to IT. Kill Eden Marlowe's access to all external vendor portals immediately. A senior IT tech tried to comply. He searched for my user permissions, my network access, my digital footprint. He found nothing. The portal wasn't a Halbert and Pike system. It didn't live on their servers or answer to their domain controller. It was a fortress, and I was the only one with the key. The access denial report that kicked back to him was a simple, stark message: user does not exist on this network. Cole, now likely getting a panicked earful from his father, came looking for me. He didn't find me at my desk. He found me where I was most powerful, in the electrical room on the 71st floor, the concrete heart of the building. The air thrummed with the sound of power. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted over the din of the ventilation fans. I didn't answer. Instead, I pointed to a temporary power distribution box in the corner. A thick bundle of orange cables snaked out from it, powering a massive bank of theatrical lights that had been set up for the Week of WoW keynote stage. The main socket where the box was plugged in was visibly scorched, a dark ring of burnt plastic around the prongs. The air smelled of ozone. "That power draw exceeds the circuit's rated capacity by 40%, I said, my voice calm and clinical. "It's a Class B fire hazard. You approved the lighting vendor's setup yourself. I have the signed work order." He looked from the overloaded socket to my face. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. This wasn't an abstract legal threat. This was fire, smoke, and liability. This was something he could understand. "The technicians can't fix it without a signed incident report acknowledging the unauthorized modification to the floor's electrical layout," I continued, pulling a pre-printed form and a pen from the pocket of my blazer. "It's a formality, just a record that you authorized the change so we can get them started on the rewiring." I handed him the form and the pen. He saw it as a bureaucratic hurdle, an annoying piece of paperwork to get past this new, more immediate problem. He wanted the problem to go away. He wanted to get back to the real emergency his father was screaming about. He barely glanced at the text. He just saw his name and a signature line. "Fine, whatever, just get it fixed," he snapped. He braced the paper against a server rack and signed his name with an angry slash of ink. I took the paper from him. The document he had just signed was titled, "Acknowledgement of Unsupervised and Unsafe Modification of Core Electrical Infrastructure." It was his confession. It was my Exhibit A. It was the documented cause I needed. I folded it neatly and placed it in my pocket as I walked out of the room, leaving him alone with the hum of the servers and the smell of his own smoldering incompetence. The meeting with his father was about to start. I had what I needed. The countdown began not with a bang, but with a quiet digital chime. 1:30 p.m. My phone vibrated softly on the desk beside my keyboard. The screen displayed a notification from my bank's secure app. It was not a message that required a response. It was a statement of fact, a line item in the Great Ledger. Confirmation, outgoing wire transfer of $6,300, $1,000 to Sterling Title and Escrow has been successfully received. The 10% earnest money was in place. The game was now real. The chips were on the table. 1:41 p.m. A calendar notification bloomed in the top right corner of my monitor. An insistent, pulsing red banner. Grant Verdon had started his emergency meeting. The Zoom window was a mosaic of stressed, important faces, each in their own virtual box. The title of the meeting, displayed in bold white letters, told me everything I needed to know about how little they understood. It read, "The nameplate incident. They were holding a corporate trial for a misdemeanor, completely unaware that their entire house was being repossessed." My own screen was split into 3 windows. On the left, the blinking cursor of the secure vendor portal. In the middle, a live feed of my personal email. On the right, a simple clock application, the seconds sweeping by in a smooth, merciless arc. 1:47 p.m. An email arrived in my personal inbox. The sender was DocuSign, on behalf of Sterling Vantage Properties. The subject, "Action required signature requested on Glassmere Tower." Assignment agreement. This was it, the final package, the digital keys to the kingdom. I clicked the link. The familiar yellow and black interface loaded. A long document scrolling into view. At the very top, in a red box, was the critical condition: Execution of this document is contingent upon the assignee providing sufficient evidence of capability to manage and mitigate on-site tenant risk to the landlord's satisfaction. This was their final checkpoint, the last gate, and I held the key. 1:55 p.m. I switched to the vendor portal. I opened a new message to Sterling Vantage's legal team. Subject: Fulfillment of Contingency Clause 4.b. Tenant Risk Management. I wrote a single sentence. Please find attached the requested documentation. I attached 2 files. The first was a PDF scan of the form Cole had just signed in the electrical room, his angry signature a stark confession. The second was the video file, Exhibit B, MP4. I hit send. For a full minute, nothing happened. I watched the clock. The second hand swept past the 12, then the 1, then the 2. My heart was a steady, heavy drum against my ribs. Then, the portal refreshed. Beside my sent message, a new status indicator appeared, a single word in quiet, green text, sufficient. The gate was open. 2:03 p.m. in Briars Point. My lawyer, acting on a prearranged signal, a simple text message from me that said, execute, pushed the final SNDA document from his office to the Briarwood Trust's legal department. It was the last piece of paperwork the lender needed, the final assurance that their investment was sound. 7 minutes later, a new email arrived in my personal inbox. This one from my contact at the trust. It was blessedly brief. All documentation received and approved. We are comfortable. Proceed. The money was no longer just committed. It was guaranteed. The office around me was a blur of activity. The week of WOW was in full swing. I could hear the muffled sounds of an enthusiastic presentation from the main conference room down the hall. People bustled past my desk, their faces a mixture of corporate cheer and conference fatigue. They were living in one reality, a world of PowerPoint slides and client handshakes. I was in another, a silent, high-stakes world of digital signatures and 9-figure wire transfers. 2:12 p.m., a new message popped up on my screen. It wasn't an email, it was a direct chat ping from Grant Verdon's account, a tool he used when he wanted to bypass the formality of email and exert direct pressure. The message was 3 words, a digital command. Get in here. I took a slow breath. I looked at the clock. 2:12 p.m. My closing call was in 3 minutes. Their emergency meeting could wait. I typed my reply, my fingers steady. I will have an answer for you at 2:20 p.m. I did not ask for permission. I did not apologize for the delay. I gave him a fact. I set the timeline. The subtle shift in power was a current only I could feel. 2:15 p.m. I put on my headset. I clicked the link in my calendar. A video call window opened. 2 faces looked back at me. One was my lawyer from Briars Point, his expression calm and professional. The other was the senior partner from Sterling Vantage, a man in his 60s with the tired, shrewd eyes of someone who had been doing deals like this his entire life. All parties present, the Sterling partner asked, his voice a gravelly baritone. Yes, my lawyer replied. He looked at me. Eden. This was the moment of official declaration, the point at which the ghost of Lantern Creek Holdings became flesh and blood. Present, I said, my voice clear and even. Eden Marlowe, managing member of Lantern Creek Holdings. The Sterling partner nodded, looking down at the documents on his desk. Good. Let's proceed to final signatures. 2:19 p.m. I clicked the sign button on the DocuSign page. A new dialog box appeared. For your security, a one-time passcode has been sent to your mobile device. My personal phone, sitting on the desk, lit up with a text message, a 6-digit number. I typed the code into the box and hit confirm. The yellow signature tab on the document was instantly replaced by my clean, digital autograph, time-stamped for 2:19 p.m. 2:23 p.m. For 4 agonizing minutes, the document status remained waiting for others. The men on the call were silent, each of us understanding that the final move belonged to the seller. I watched the Sterling partner's face on the screen. He was reading something on his own monitor, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded once, to himself. He picked up his mouse, on my screen. The status bar flashed green. Completed. A flurry of notifications arrived, as the fully executed document was automatically distributed to all parties. The ownership of the master lease for the Glassmere Tower, effective immediately, now belonged to Lantern Creek Holdings, LLC. It was done. My lawyer gave me a small, professional smile. Congratulations, Ms. Marlowe. The Sterling partner was more direct. She's your problem now, he said, and ended the call. 2:28 p.m. I took off my headset and set it gently on its cradle. I stood up. The frantic energy of the office seemed to slow down, the ambient noise fading into a distant hum. I picked up my phone, my personal phone, and walked toward the large, glass-walled conference room where Grant Verdon was holding his court. Through the glass, I could see them. Grant at the head of the table, his face a thundercloud, Cole beside him, looking both angry and confused, Janice from HR, the head of legal, a few other vice presidents, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. 14 other faces stared out from the large monitor at the end of the room, the remote attendees of the emergency meeting. I pushed the heavy glass door open. The conversation stopped. Every head in the room, both physical and virtual, turned to me. I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the long, polished table from Grant. I did not sit. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch, letting them feel the shift in the atmosphere. Then, with a quiet, deliberate motion, I placed my phone face down on the table. The sound, a soft click of glass on wood, was the only noise in the room. It was the sound of a clock striking the final hour, the sound of a new owner taking her seat. The 14 faces on the Zoom screen watched silently, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to outright boredom. They were tuning in for corporate drama. A minor HR issue to break the monotony of the conference week. In the room, the air was thick with expectation. Grant Verdon sat at the head of the table, a patriarch presiding over a family matter. Cole was beside him, leaning back in his chair with the smug satisfaction of a battle already won. Janice from HR had her hands folded neatly, a neutral observer ready to enforce the verdict. Arthur Vance, the company's general counsel, looked annoyed, his time being wasted on trivialities. Grant cleared his throat, a sound that commanded immediate silence. He fixed his gaze on me, a look of profound disappointment that he had perfected over decades of managing subordinates. "Eden," he began, his voice low and firm, "we've had a serious breakdown in communication, a lapse in professional decorum. Your actions have made a member of the executive team feel disrespected. We need to rectify this, and we need to do it now. You will apologize to Cole." The room waited. The faces on the screen leaned in. This was the moment of submission, the part of the script where the disobedient employee is brought back into line. I met Grant's gaze. My own was flat, devoid of anger or fear. It was the gaze of an auditor, of an inspector, of someone who was not there to negotiate. I reached down to the leather satchel at my feet and pulled out a single, 1-inch thick file folder, bound by a simple black rubber band. I placed it on the polished surface of the table. The sound was a soft, definitive thud. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room like a thrown stone. "I will not be apologizing. I am the new landlord of this building." A beat of stunned silence was followed by a single, sharp bark of laughter from Cole. One of the VPs at the table chuckled, looking at Grant as if to share the joke. On the Zoom screen, a few of the attendees exchanged confused glances. Grant's face hardened. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now. You are an employee of this company." I corrected him gently. My resignation was automatically tendered upon the execution of a contract that placed me in a position of material conflict of interest. That execution occurred at 2:23 p.m. today. Arthur Vance, the lawyer, finally spoke up, his voice laced with patronizing impatience. "Ms. Marlowe, whatever fantasy you're indulging in, I suggest you end it. The building is owned by Sterling Vantage Properties. We have a lease, a very, very long lease." "You did," I said. I removed the rubber band from the file folder. I slid the top document across the table toward him. "You'll recognize this. It's a complete set of the estoppel certificates from every tenant in this building, all dated within the last 2 weeks, affirming their leases are in good standing." Arthur glanced at it, frowning. It was routine. I slid out a second document. "This is the subordination. Non-disturbance, an attornment agreement between Halbert and Pike and the Briarwood Regional Trust, ensuring the lender's security in your tenancy." His frown deepened. This was less routine. "This," I said, my voice remaining perfectly level as I slid a third document onto the pile, "is the official right of first refusal notice sent by Sterling Vantage to your legal department 6 days ago, detailing a third-party offer to purchase the property." Arthur's eyes widened slightly. He looked over at Cole, a flash of accusation in his gaze. "This," I continued, my rhythm steady, a new document for every beat, "is the wire transfer confirmation from Sterling Title and Escrow, acknowledging receipt of the $6.3 million earnest money deposit from Lantern Creek Holdings." The name meant nothing to them. It was just a strange, unfamiliar sound. "And this," I said, placing the final, slender document on top, "is the DocuSign completion certificate. It is a fully executed assignment and assumption of landlord's interest in the Glassmere Tower master lease, signed by Sterling Vantage Properties, countersigned by me, time-stamped today at 2:23 p.m. The laughter in the room was gone. It had been sucked out, replaced by a vacuum of disbelief. Arthur Vance snatched the pile of documents. His hands, which had been so steady moments before, now moved with a frantic energy. He flipped through the estoppel certificates, the SNDA, his eyes scanning, processing. He landed on the final page of the DocuSign certificate. His finger traced the digital signature block for the assignee. Lantern Creek Holdings, LLC, signed by Eden Marlowe, managing member. Arthur went pale. He leaned back in his chair, the documents held loosely in his hand. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by the cold, sickening dread of a professional who has just witnessed a catastrophe he should have prevented. He looked at Grant, and his silence was more damning than any scream. I broke the silence myself. My voice was calm, instructional, the voice I used to explain complex HVAC schematics. "To be perfectly clear," I said, addressing the entire room, "Sterling Vantage Properties has sold its full interest in the master lease of this building. That interest was acquired by a private entity called Lantern Creek Holdings. I am the sole managing member of that entity, which means that as of 23 minutes ago, Halbert and Pike Solutions is a tenant in my building. You no longer pay rent to Sterling Vantage. You pay rent to me." Cole's face was a mask of crimson rage. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair back. "This is impossible. It's insane, Dad. She's lying. She's nobody." "Sit down." "Cole," Grant's voice was a low growl, but there was a tremor in it. For the first time, he looked not at me, but at his lawyer. Arthur could only give a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Grant's hand, resting on the table, began to tremble. I let them absorb the impact for a moment before I presented the terms. "You have 2 options," I stated, my eyes sweeping across the stunned faces in the room. "Option 1 is simple. You do nothing. You continue to abide by the terms of your existing lease, the only change being the name and account number on your monthly rent payment. Your access remains. Your rights as a tenant are undisturbed. We will have a productive, professional landlord-tenant relationship." I paused, letting the word professional hang in the air. "Option 2, I continued, my voice becoming colder, sharper, "is that you choose to challenge this. You can attempt to breach the terms of the lease. You can refuse to adjourn. You can take any action that violates the agreement that now exists between us. And if you do, I will immediately serve you with a notice of default, which, as I'm sure Arthur can confirm, gives you a cure period of exactly 5 business days before I begin eviction proceedings and file a suit for the full value of the remaining lease term. Cole was sputtering, but no words came out. Grant stared at me, his face ashen. He looked like a man who had just seen the blueprints of a prison built especially for him. I looked from the father to the son. I let a small, tight smile touch my lips for the first time. "You see," I said, my voice now dropping to an almost conversational tone, "the legal instrument that designated Lantern Creek as your official assignee, the document that gave me the authority to execute the ROFR on your behalf, was the addendum you both signed last week." I looked directly at Cole. It was buried in the appendix of the mood board for the new office design, the one you fast-tracked to get what you called the 12% discount. A collective, silent gasp seemed to pass through the room. The full scale of their incompetence was now laid bare. They had not been outmaneuvered by a brilliant legal strategy. They had been defeated by their own arrogance, by their refusal to read the fine print. No one spoke. For 6 full seconds, the only sound was the low, steady hum of the air conditioning vents in the ceiling. The system I had personally redesigned for maximum efficiency was now blowing cold, sterile air over the ruins of their authority. It sounded like the wind howling through a canyon. It sounded like the end. The first to recover was the lawyer. Arthur Vance pushed himself forward, his professional composure returning like a mask being lowered into place. He was no longer looking at a disgruntled employee. He was looking at an opponent. "This is a procedural sham," he declared, his voice regaining its courtroom authority. "We will have this entire transaction invalidated. It is a clear and egregious case of conflict of interest. You used your position, your access to our confidential information, to your own benefit. No court will uphold it." The threat hung in the air. The first salvo fired. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "A conflict of interest." "Arthur," I replied. My tone as cool as the glass table between us. "Applies to public officials or fiduciaries with a duty to their shareholders. I was neither. I was a facilities manager. Furthermore, the transaction was conducted by Lantern Creek Holdings, an independent legal entity. And as for disclosure," I paused, letting my gaze drift to Cole and then his father. "You were provided with the full documentation designating my entity as the assignee. The fact that you chose not to read the addendum you initialed is a failure of your due diligence, not a failure of my disclosure." Grant Verdon slammed his open palm on the table. The sound made the remote attendees on the Zoom screen jump. "Enough. We don't have to stay here. We'll find another tower. We will move this entire company out of this building within 6 months." It was his trump card. The threat of a CEO who believed his company was the asset, not the space it occupied. "Please feel free to do so," I said without blinking. "I would, of course, be sorry to see you go. However, I must remind you of Section 17 Subclause B of the lease you signed. The early termination penalty. I've already calculated it for you. It's $18,450,000, payable within 30 days of your notice to vacate. I'm happy to have the invoice drawn up this afternoon." The color drained from Grant's face. The $18 million figure was not a bluff. It was a number from a contract he had signed, a financial manacle he had locked upon his own company's ankle. Cole, seeing his father falter, lunged into the breach with the only weapon he had left: scorn. "You can't do this. You're just the facilities manager. You're the help." "I was the facilities manager," I corrected him, my voice cutting through his anger with surgical precision. "And now I am the landlord, Cole, which makes you the tenant. You should try to remember that." From the corner of my eye, I saw Janice from HR lean toward Arthur, whispering frantically. I could read the words on her lips: hostile environment. The last refuge of a corporate bureaucrat. A weapon to turn my own actions against me. Before Arthur could even formulate the argument, I reached into my satchel again and retrieved a small, black USB drive. I placed it gently on the table, pushing it into the center. It looked small and insignificant against the vast, polished wood. "That," I said, looking directly at Janice, is a high-resolution video file of Cole destroying company property this morning, accompanied by a time-stamped log of the celebratory and mocking comments from other employees on the internal network. The legal definition of a hostile work environment is based on documented, unwelcome conduct. Janice, not on the feelings of the person who created it. You had your chance to address the conduct when I filed my report. You chose to file it away. I chose to keep a backup. Janice recoiled as if the USB drive were radioactive. Grant Verdon was a fighter. He saw the legal and financial traps closing around him, so he switched tactics. He tried to bargain, to pull me back into the world he understood, the world of hierarchies and promotions. "Eden," he said, his voice now strained, attempting a conciliatory tone. "Clearly, you are a woman of considerable ambition. We've underestimated you. This has all been a terrible mistake. What if we made things right? We can create a new position. Executive Vice President of Operations, a board seat, a real stake in the company." I almost smiled. He was offering me a more ornate cage, a more prestigious title in a company that was now, in a very real sense, my captive. I shook my head slowly. "Grant, you don't understand. I'm not interested in a new business card. My business is real estate. I sell seats in a building. I don't buy them at a table." Arthur Vance, the lawyer, was making one last, desperate scan of the documents, his mind racing, searching for a loophole, a missed clause, a single thread he could pull. He found it, or he thought he did. "The consent," he exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger at the agreement. "You needed the consent of the landlord, of Sterling Vantage, to have the lease assigned to you. Where is their signature consenting to you specifically?" I reached out and tapped the final page of the document already in his hand. "Page 41, Arthur, the assignment and assumption agreement. You'll find the notarized signature of Marcus Thorne, managing partner of Sterling Vantage Properties. Right there. It was executed at 2:23 p.m. They were more than happy to consent once I provided them with evidence that the current tenant's management was a clear and present risk to their asset." I glanced at Cole. "Your son was my best reference." That was the final blow. The machine had no more gears to grind. The fight was over. Cole, his face pale and slick with sweat, finally collapsed into his chair. He stared at me, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a raw, desperate confusion. He leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want?" It was the first honest question he had ever asked me. "One thing," I said, my voice softening, not with pity, but with a cold finality, respect, and for you to stay out of my life, permanently. I reached into my file one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was printed on the new letterhead I'd had designed for Lantern Creek Holdings. I slid it across the table until it stopped directly in front of Grant. The title was simple: Notice of Building Policy. This is a new policy, effective immediately, for all tenants of the Glassmere Tower. I announced, it prohibits the willful damage or destruction of any building property, including fixtures, signage, and safety notices. The first violation will result in a financial penalty assessed to the tenant company. A second violation will result in the permanent revoking of the offending individual's access privileges and a civil prosecution for damages. Grant Verdon read the words. He looked at the policy, then at his son. The last vestiges of his authority were being used to enforce my rules. He looked at Cole, and his voice was heavy, defeated. Cole apologized to Ms. Marlowe. It was the first time in 3 years he had ever pronounced my last name correctly. Cole's head snapped up. He looked at his father, then at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. He was trapped. He finally pushed himself to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. He couldn't look me in the eye. He stared at a point on the wall just over my shoulder. "I apologize," he mumbled, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I gave a slight, formal nod. I reached into the breast pocket of my blazer and took out the broken shard of plastic, the piece with the 7 letters of my name. I walked to the head of the table where Grant sat and placed it on the polished wood. Then I took out the other half, the one with the first name, which I had retrieved from my desk drawer. I pushed the two jagged pieces together. They didn't fit perfectly. A thin, visible line ran between them, a scar of fractured plastic, a fault line, a permanent record of the break, and the mending. Without taking my eyes off Grant, I walked to the head of the table where he sat. I unplugged the conference room's display cable from his laptop and connected it to my own. The large monitor at the end of the room flickered, his panicked Zoom screen replaced by the clean, minimalist interface of my desktop. There was only one window open. It was a new email, drafted and ready to send. The remote attendees, who had been watching the drama unfold in the room, were now staring at a wall of black text. I clicked the mouse, and the cursor highlighted the subject line for all to see. To Grant Verdon, Arthur Vance, Janice Miller, all company leadership distribution list. From E. Marlowe, Managing Member, Lantern Creek Holdings, LLC. Subject Halbert and Pike Solutions, Rent Payment Instructions and Building Policy, effective immediately. The words hung in the silent room, stark and absolute. I didn't speak. I let them read. I let the cold, bureaucratic language of the email do the work. Attached to it were 3 documents. The first was a PDF titled, New Landlord Wire and ACH Instructions, detailing the routing and account numbers for Lantern Creek Holdings. The second was a Q4 2025 preliminary maintenance schedule, which outlined upcoming fire system inspections, window washings, and HVAC filter replacements, all the invisible work that I controlled, now made visible. The third attachment was the one I had placed on the table, Glassmere Tower Tenant Code of Conduct. I scrolled down through the body of the email, my finger moving on the trackpad. The text laid out the new reality in emotionless prose. Rent was due on the 1st of the month. Late fees would be assessed beginning on the 3rd. All maintenance requests were to be routed through the new Lantern Creek tenant portal, access to which would be granted within the hour. Grant Verdon stared at the screen, his face a ruin. He had built an empire of abstract code, of ones and zeros, and he had been undone by the physical reality of the building that housed it. He looked defeated. He looked old. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of complete and total surrender. Arthur Vance, his face grim, picked up a pen. I pushed a printed copy of a tenant acknowledgement of new landlord form that had been at the bottom of my file. It was a simple document, confirming their receipt of the new terms. He signed it with a sharp, angry stroke of the pen, the scratch of the nib on the paper the only sound. Cole, however, was not finished. He was a creature of the modern age, a man who believed that if an event wasn't recorded, it hadn't truly happened. His humiliation was a currency, and he intended to spend it. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb swiping frantically to open the camera app. He was going to live-stream his defeat, to frame himself as the victim in a new narrative. He never got the chance. A large, quiet man in a crisp black security uniform stepped into the room. I recognized him. Frank. He'd been the lead for the day shift for 5 years. A good man. A professional. Now, he worked for me. Frank moved with an unhurried grace. He did not touch Cole. He simply placed himself between Cole's phone and me. His presence a solid, unmovable wall. He gently placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "Sir," Frank said, his voice deep and calm, yet carrying an undeniable authority. "There is no filming permitted in the landlord's office area." The words struck Cole with the force of a physical blow. The landlord's office, this room, the seat of his father's power, had just been redefined. It was no longer his territory. He looked from Frank's impassive face to mine. He lowered the phone. I stood up. The confrontation was over. The negotiation was complete. With a quiet, deliberate motion, I pushed my chair back into its proper place at the table. The soft whir of the caster wheels rolling across the low-pile carpet was a clean, final sound. It was the sound of a line being drawn, of a door being closed, of a new order being established. My phone, the one I had left on the table, vibrated. The screen lit up with a notification. It was 2:41 p.m., a message from my bank. Escrow funds have been released to seller. Transaction recordation is now pending with the county clerk. The money was gone from my account. The deed was done. I took a slow, deep breath, the first one that seemed to reach the bottom of my lungs all day. The tension I had carried for months, a tight, cold knot in my chest, finally began to dissolve. I walked out of the conference room, leaving them to the silence and the wreckage of their afternoon. I didn't look back. I walked down the long corridor, my footsteps echoing faintly in the quiet hall. I stopped in front of a corner office, the best one on the floor. It had 2 walls of solid glass, offering a panoramic view of the city and the sky. Yesterday, it had belonged to the chief marketing officer. Today, the nameplate beside the door was new. It was a simple piece of brushed aluminum, with my name engraved in clean, black Helvetica. Eden Marlowe. I went inside and closed the door. My desk was empty, a clean slate. I sat down in the large leather chair and looked out at the city. My city. I took the 2 broken pieces of my old nameplate from my pocket. I didn't try to fix them. I slid them into a simple, plain manila envelope. I licked the seal and pressed it down. I opened the top drawer of my new desk. It was empty. I placed the sealed envelope inside and closed it. The wound was now an archive, a reminder. I looked down through the vast expanse of glass. Far below, on the plaza at the base of the tower, I could see the reflection of the silver halberd and pike logo from the building's entrance. From 72 floors up, it was small, distorted, an insignificant silver marking on the pavement, a detail in the landscape that I now owned. I leaned back in my chair. The meeting was over. The work was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and consider hitting that hype button to help it reach more listeners just like you.